And there are several stories. And you might say, as from time to time occurs, that they come in the form of a curved ball. We all know what a curved ball is. But the first story is just to prepare the mind a little, play with the energies a little. It's a story about a mother bird who had 3 babies. But it came time for her to fly south for the winter. And she knew that her fledglings were not ready to fly all the distance south. So she had to carry them on her back. So she flew and she flew, 1 day, 2 days, and on the 3rd day she was so fatigued and so tired she could not fly any further. So she came down and landed on a snow-covered branch. But as she landed, feeling the great fatigue that she had, not believing that she could go on, she turned to the first of her little fledglings and she said, "When I get old and I'm not able to fly anymore, will you put me on your back and fly me south?" "No," said the fledgling. "Oh, you ungrateful bird," said the mother. So she pushed the fledgling off the branch into the deep snow below. And then she turned to the second fledgling and asked the same question. "When I'm old and not able to fly, would you carry me on your back?" "No," said the second fledgling. So the mother tossed the fledgling off the branch into the snow. With some trepidation she turned to the third little fledgling and asked the same question. And the little fledgling said, "Mother, I cannot promise that I will be able to do so, because by the time that you are old and not able to fly anymore, I may have fledglings of my own, and I will need to carry them on my back south, just as you have done for us." And then there's a story about an Indian man, Hindu, of the priestly caste, a Brahmin. He was a pious man. He had 1 son. And when his son came to the age of 7 years old, it was time to take him to the temple to learn the ways of the priestly caste. So the Brahmin took his son to the temple and spoke to the priests. "Now tell me," he asked, "how will you teach my son?" And the priest said, "Well, first of all, we will teach him all the rituals of the priesthood." "Oh, no, no, no," said the father. "What about the ancient teachings of the origins of life, the Vedas?" "Oh, no," said the priest. "First of all, the children have to be taught the rituals, the protocols, the ways of the priest." "No, no, no, in that case," said the Brahmin, "I will take him home and teach him myself." So he took his young son home, and he took down an ancient tome which contained the great Vedas, the histories of the origins of life, great stories of the cosmos, in the Sanskrit language. So first of all, he taught his son that wonderful and beautiful ancient language, Sanskrit. And then together they were able to read the ancient book of the beginnings of life, the ways of existence, the laws. But it was not very long when one day the boy was sitting in his garden, and he was a pious young lad. He loved to open this ancient bound volume, to read the wonderful flowing poetry of the language of Sanskrit, exposing and teaching the great teachings of life. But at that time, they were being invaded from other places. And as the boy was sitting in the garden, a troop of soldiers from an enemy territory came along and swept him up, taking him and his book off to this other kingdom, where he was thrown into a dungeon with boys from all other places that had been stolen, and his book was taken away from him. And he languished there, waiting to know what his fate would be. But it so happened that the king of that kingdom was falling into a state of depression. Nothing pleased him. The success of his armies, the births of his children, nothing gave him any pleasure, and the people around him were desperate to try to lift their king's spirits in some way so that he would have some enthusiasm for life. So they had a thought, maybe if he was read to, maybe if he was entertained in this way, it might lift his spirit. So his advisors went to the cache where all of these books and ancient scrolls were kept. And as fate would have it, one of the advisors picked up the ancient bound volume of the Vedas. But when they brought it back and opened it up to read it to the king, they found that it was a language that they did not know, Sanskrit. But then it was remembered, oh, we have that Hindu boy in our dungeons. He may be able to read. So the boy was brought up from the dungeon. And when he came in the presence of the king, and there was his bound book, beloved book, he began to weep. And when he was asked to read, and he began to read the great story of life to the king's spirits began to lift, and he too began to weep at how everything was interrelated. Even his own states of depression. And so, afterwards, when the king spoke to the boy, after he'd asked him why was he weeping, and the boy responded that this was his book, these were his teachings that came from his father, the king, of course, gave the boy his freedom. He was clad in fine clothes, given gold coins, and sent back to the land of his father, who of course greatly rejoiced at his return. How could it be possible that these stories can have a relationship? What is it that can happen with a twist of mind? Because it was very obvious from the first story, this simple story about a mother bird, and what it did for us in terms of perhaps tweaking our mind. And this second story, how do they come together? Just like in us, how do the myriad of elements of the movement of life in all its dimensions fit with this state that we find ourselves in. Perpetual presence, here-ness, alertness. But making it simple, because in this environment we have this possibility of experiencing it. When you're with someone, how do you get their attention? When you know their minds are all over the place. They're in a state of confusion. Like the girl at the supermarket. She fleetingly glances at you and says, "So how are you today?" And she's got this going on and that going on and worrying about what she's got a hangover and she's, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And pretty much everyone we meet is like that. Their energy is scattered all over the place. How do you get their attention? This story did it about the little bird, didn't it? It got our mind. Because of its enigmatic nature, it brought us right here, available, in a sense, to allow what the second story would bring. Right or not right?
Because if like in the supermarket, when that happens, if you just, like look, like focus on her and just talk to her,
yes,
then somehow she stops fidgeting so much and she like starts like looking more at you as she's giving you the decision.
absolutely.
And we just keep then talking to her like
Absolutely. Absolutely.
She probably recognises that you're not in that state, and
You're with her.
Somebody,
She's
somebody's
seen me. She's
present.
seen me. Present. Absolutely. And so immediately there's a receptivity there, an opening there. If it's appropriate to go on, even say a few words. Oh, gee, it must be a busy day for you today, or you're coming to the end of your shift, Whatever it is, there's that. Because in those words it contained the totality of what it is that we are. So what about this second story? What did it evoke in us relative to our knowledge and awareness of a continuum? What comes first? The rituals, the trappings, the lighting of the incense and the
roots, the truth.
Yes.
Like between the first and the second story, what is similar is that in putting the roots at their place, it's giving the, I don't know how to say, but it's kind of allowing to understand that the continuity of life, roots are roots at their place, but life is going on and linked to it. It's all interconnected, but
yes.
it has to go to continue its own way, according to where it comes from.
Yes.
Like the bird, I will have my little one to carry. It's like grateful for what you did, and so as you did, I will do. It's as life is going on. If you stay in the back, life can.
No. Good. Absolutely correct awareness. So we see coming together those levels of existence, those 3 levels of existence, Satchidananda, existence, knowledge and bliss, operating at every moment while we're in this state of presence. So it's not just some airy-fairy stuff, it's observable for ourselves. So in observing it, we can become aware of those laws in operation. And in seeing those laws in operation, we come to know those laws.